Good afternoon, and welcome to this presentation, Pysanky, the Art of Eggs. On behalf of the Knights of Columbus Museum, thank you for joining this session, one of a weekly online series for the benefit of Knights of Columbus Museum patrons. This presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the museum's YouTube and Facebook accounts. An email message tomorrow to all registrants will provide video links and information about next week's topic, the Knights of Columbus headquarters building, with archivist Vivian Lee Solik. A few additional notes before we begin. The Knights of Columbus Museum remains closed while we wait and pray for the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. For information about the museum and its upcoming events and offerings, visit kofcmuseum.org or follow the museum on social media channels at KOFC Museum. You may submit questions at any point in the presentation using the questions utility. I'll monitor activity throughout the presentation and can respond privately to anyone experiencing technical issues. I'll address a selection of your questions to our presenter in the Q&A session following his talk, and the talk should last between 30 to 40 minutes. Now, today's talk was originally scheduled for March 15th live in the museum, and I'm pleased that it was rescheduled because our presenter has a very loyal following. Father Paul Luniw was born and educated in Halifax, West Yorkshire, England. That's central England, near the city of Manchester. He originally trained and was certified and employed as a state registered nurse, and that's a designation that he continues to hold. After he discerned his vocation to the priesthood, Father Paul went to Rome to study philosophy and theology and was ordained March 25th, 1982, and traveled to the United States to begin his ministry in the Ukrainian Archeparchy of Philadelphia. Later, he returned to Rome for studies in canon law and a short period of ministry in England. Since returning to the United States, Father Paul has been a priest in the Eparchy of Stamford, Connecticut, initially serving as pastor of St. Michael's Church in New Haven, which is just a few blocks from the Knights of Columbus Museum.
Yes, it is.
He furthered his studies at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and was assigned to St. Michael's Church in Hartford, where in addition to his pastoral duties, his canon law training served both the Stamford Eparchy and the Archdiocese of Hartford as well. Father Paul was transferred to St. Michael's Church in Terryville, which is his current assignment, in 2003, and he has since completed his doctorate in canon law in Rome. And Father Paul's hobby is Pysanky, the traditional Ukrainian art of brightly colored, ornately decorated eggs, which he learned from his late mother. Pysanky was to be his topic in the live presentation I mentioned at the museum in mid-March during the Lenten season, and Father will explain the significance of that. When the pandemic prevented him from sharing his pastime in person, on that occasion, technology is today allowing us to share that topic with you. So Father Paul, I turn the session over to you, and we'll be available to assist you throughout and offer some questions to you at the conclusion.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Christos Voskres, and thank you, Mr. Peter Sonsky, for inviting me to speak at the Knights of Columbus, indeed, about the Pysanky, the art of the egg. Certainly one of my favorite hobbies that I have, which I've done for many years. Some of you have seen my eggs in different perspectives, and today I want to present a little bit of the background and also some of the history and something of the technical aspect of how we do these eggs, and certainly share them with you. And certainly, as Peter pointed out, yes, I've been in 3 parishes, all dedicated to St. Michael. So I'm sure St. Michael the Archangel is watching over me today as I present this topic of Ukrainian Pysanky. First of all, the roots of Pysanky date back to pre-Christian times. It seems that the Pysanka extended from an agricultural society depicting the earth, trees, Mother Earth, and of course solar symbols and so on. During the Neolithic age, Pysanky were written in a language of pictorial marks, which is a source for many people of information today. And in many cultures, mythology boasts of a cosmic egg from which comes the universe or God creator. And in those early days, the ancient Slavs believed that the egg was not unlike a huge eggshell, which symbolized the heavens. The membrane represented the clouds, the white of the egg symbolized the water, and the yolk represented the earth. Some of the motifs would be present in ceramic pottery of Trypillian culture. In fact, I have here a little vase, which is of ceramic creation. This is the design that you would see on Trypillian eggs today. I would ask Peter now to show the Trypillian egg. As I mentioned, the Trypillian culture eventually found itself onto the Pysanky. The egg is divided in different ways, and along its diameter, that's not the one, Peter, it's the dark brown one beforehand. Along its diameter, the symbol of a serpent or pine branch. This represents the division of the two worlds. In ancient beliefs, this egg from which everything emerged was born from and divided by a serpent, the god of the earth, of the underworld and fire. Here I do have a Pysanky, which is a Trypillian egg. As you can see the design there, it's normally a dark background, brown colors to symbolize the earth, and also it's the orangey color symbolizes the warmth of the sun. So the serpent was the main deity of the earth, along with the goddess Mother Earth, that created everything alive on the earth, being an element of a pagan spring holiday dedicated to the spirit of rebirth. Red is a common color, as you can see on this egg. Most of the eggs have the color red on them. In fact, I have an egg here, which I can show you, which is a red color. This is just one color. In pre-Christian times, the red color would be prevalent in the tombs of the ancients, because they would sprinkle red ochre onto the bodies, into the tomb, promising them and preparing them for eternity. And of course, the eggs were always considered red, even though they may have been another color. Eggs also are connected with magical powers. Of course, everybody has some superstition about an egg, but of course, there are the superstitions there, and of course, there are truths connected with them. During the Bronze Age, the sky belonged to the male god, and the earth belonged to the female goddess. The egg then became attributed to the sunbird, the rooster. And incidentally, on Pysanky, when we depict hens and roosters, those are a symbol of fertility and strength. So in other words, sometimes in the spring, if a girl wanted to become pregnant, become fertile, her boyfriend, husband, would give her an egg, symbolizing fertility. And of course, all these symbols had great meanings. And over the centuries, the eggs were found in burial sites, which symbolized a form of rebirth, which was justified. It seems the oldest Pysanky on record dates back to the 9th century. Peter, if you can show the old box of eggs that we had there. If not, we can show it later. I have the box here. In fact, I do have a collection of my old eggs, which we'll show you as we go through the slides here. In actual fact, the old eggs that I have are not from the 9th century. They are from the 70s. And what I'm doing at the moment is trying to trace all these eggs that I have decorated since my teen years, and trying to find them, at least get the photographs or collect some of them so that I have them in my archives. And of course, I have traced some of my eggs to Ukraine, Poland, Rome, different parts of Italy, France, Germany, and of course, England and Belgium. So slowly but surely, I'm beginning to get these photographs together so that I can see how things have developed over the years. As we go on with the slideshow a little bit later on, I will begin to explain some of the symbolisms, and you'll see the ancient eggs that I painted in the early 70s. An ancient belief is just that the silent universe suddenly bursts forth into human activity and life. The egg also, in its own way, brings forth life in a triumphant way. The egg was celebrated for its renewal of nature and of life. And after the dark winter, the sun warmed the soil. There are many symbolisms in Pysanky, as you can see here on the egg that we see on the photograph. The horizontal line with no beginning and no end symbolizes eternity. And of course, the Pysanka would symbolize in many ways good health, beauty, strength, and a plentiful harvest. It was also used to prevent natural disasters and calamities in the world, fire and thunderstorm. The Pysanka was also used to prevent illnesses. The Pysanka would be buried in the ground, especially where the wheat was growing, so there would be a plentiful harvest. And finally, the Pysanka would be placed under a beehive so that the bees would swarm and eventually produce lots of honey. So now we come to the Pysanka being interwoven with ancient beliefs. And now I'm going to mention something about these ancient beliefs connected to the cycle of the sun and the ancient calendar. One of the words which remains to the present day, and I think some of the audience watching today will be quite surprised to hear this, the word Velykdень. The word Velykdeń means great day, most significant day. And of course, that word Velykdeń refers to Easter. But does that word really refer to Easter? Well, it does in the present day. But did it? No, it didn't. The word Velykdeń was a pagan holiday which celebrated the victory of the sun over darkness, of life over death, and of spring over winter. With the dawn of Christianity, these holidays were no longer celebrated. But the origins of the name of this pagan tradition, Velykdeń, remains to the present day. A great day, a most significant day, the day of the resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In this photograph here, you can see on the left an egg there that has 40 Pysanky on it. In fact, that's a second egg that I did. Here is the original. It has 40 eggs on the one great ostrich egg. On the left, you can see the horizontal lines with no beginning, no end, symbolizing eternity. In actual fact, that was the egg I gave to Pope Francis last year at the audience in Rome at the Capella, the Sala Clementina. Now, the egg on the left with the 40 eggs on it would symbolize the 40 days of Lent. But there are different eggs which were created that had motifs of 40 on, which did symbolize the 40 days of Lent, but also symbolized the many facets of our own lives. We may have 40 facets, we may have lots and lots of facets, but nevertheless, they symbolize the facets of our lives. And so that's why the number 40, as well as being prevalent in the Old Testament, is a number that it's always there present. And so Velykdeń remains to the present day the celebration of Easter. The Pysanky were not a product of a single artist or a single village. They represented a whole nation. The ancient belief that the egg served as a protection against fire. The triangles on the Pysanky represented air, fire, and water. But in the Christian era, the triangle now represents Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Trinity. And so as you see on this egg here, we have a cross here. And of course, there are one or two triangles there that you can see. And that would be in the ancient system, the ancient belief that it was a protection against fire. But it's also in the new Christian era, it's a symbol of the Trinity. Now, there are many legends that are connected to Pysanky. And one of the legends is about the birds. Of course, as we know that in the spring, the birds all come out and spend summer there, sort of feeding and nesting and singing to all of us, a beautiful time of the year. But as the autumn came, the fall weather came, then the birds would begin to fly south to the warmer climate. One of the legend tells us that the poor birds were in a village there where there were poor peasants and farmers working there. And of course, as the evenings got colder, the birds wanted to fly south. But a terrible storm came, and so the birds couldn't fly. With the cold, they collapsed. And these poor peasant villagers took the birds in, nourished them, fed them, and took care of them all through the harsh winter. When the spring came, they opened the doors to let them go. So the birds flew away. But the birds always returned with an egg, a Pysanky, an egg for each household, each poor person that had taken care of them. So that was one of the legends of the first Pysanky that were created. Another legend talks about the Blessed Virgin Mary. In fact, there are two legends pertaining to the Blessed Virgin Mary. The first one is the Blessed Virgin came to Pilate with an apron full of eggs. And as she knelt before Pilate, she wept and pleaded for the life of her son. And as she opened her apron, those eggs became colored and rolled all over the world. It is said the tears of the Blessed Virgin decorated the first Pysanky. And in fact, dots on Pysanky today symbolize the tears of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Another legend speaks about the Blessed Virgin going to the cross and seeing her son crucified, places the eggs under the cross. And as the blood flowed, those eggs became stained with the red color, symbolizing that Jesus, the great warrior, had shed his blood for each and every one of us. And finally, the ancient legend that is still spoken about today is that somewhere in a remote area in the mountains is a monster that's chained there. And of course, he has his followers. And every spring, he sends out his people to see how many people are making Pysanky. And if many people are making Pysanky, his chains are tightened, and goodness, good health, and well-being prevails on earth. If, however, not many people are making Pysanky, then of course we're going to have lots of evil, hatred, wars, and all sorts of catastrophic things that would occur if people didn't make Pysanky. So speaking to you all this afternoon, I encourage you to paint Pysanky so that we can have peace, health, and goodwill in the world. And now I want to go into a little bit about the technique of Pysanky and what we use. Well, of course, we used white eggs, white unblemished eggs. And today I've brought you some which I want to show you what I used. As you can see, I have my basket here full of eggs. So I'm going to go through them one by one. The common one that you normally see is the chicken egg. That's just a white unblemished egg. Now I'm known for going into the supermarket and I go to where the eggs are and I'm looking to see which is a white unblemished egg. Of course, some people look at me and say, oh, he must be very cheap, looking to make sure he gets his money's worth. But of course, that's not the case. I'm looking to find white unblemished egg shells, which we can use for the decoration of Pysanky. However, today there is a problem, because when you buy the eggs in the supermarket or wherever you buy them from, the shells are all chemically treated. That's why when I come, and of course, bear in mind, they have all refrigerated. So, but in Europe and in England, eggs are kept on the shelves. They are not refrigerated. They are kept at room temperature and kept in the homes on the shelves. The eggs are not put in the fridges as they are here, which is, of course, a ruling from the state, which we have to adhere to. So the best place to buy the eggs from is from the farmer. You buy the egg that's been laid, that's all dirty, and you bring it home and clean it yourself. And the way of cleaning the eggs, whether they're from the supermarket or from the farmer, is to, with a little Teflon cloth, with a tablespoonful of white distilled vinegar and half a cup of warm water, distilled water, and just to scrub it and clean off the remnant of the chemical or the dirt from the farmer. And this gives the shell a nice texture so that the dyes will take. So this is the first egg, the chicken egg. Next, we have here a goose egg. Goose eggs come in all shapes and sizes, and they're all sort of very nice shapes and they take very well. And it's the same thing again, they are treated. You have to clean them with white distilled vinegar and warm water so that the dyes will take afterwards and the colors will take. The next egg I have here, an unusual egg, is a speckled turkey egg. As you can see, this egg is rather speckled, and this has to be scrubbed and clean so that the shell has a pure finish, so that you don't have these speckles on the design when you're designing or creating the pysanka. Incidentally, the egg you see on your screen now is a swan egg. That's the only swan egg I have. Those are protected species and they're not available at all. It was someone who works in different fields of work with birds and everything else that managed to get this for me. And this is the only swan egg that I have. The next egg I have here is an emu egg. Now you'd wonder why I would want an emu egg to decorate, because it's black, almost black. It's sort of a dark green black. Well, this would have to be cleaned and then worked on the egg. Or in actual fact, you can actually work on the egg as it is, having cleaned it again with white distilled vinegar and water, and then apply the wax and start to apply the light colors. But that's very difficult because it takes many, many hours to dye. So the way around this emu egg is to try and scrub some of the darkness off, even though when you do the lines, they will be dark. And they actually produce an unusual sort of decoration that you have black outlines instead of the white ones, and you have the different geometrical or floral designs which give it a new added creation. This is known as a Bantu egg, and it's a sort of like a goose egg. It's sort of a light gray color. And finally, we have here a rhea egg. This is almost the shape of a goose egg. But of course, in actual fact, this rhea egg is a beautiful shape, and it actually decorates very beautifully as well. In fact, I'm going to show you the finished product. Here is the rhea egg as it is. And here is a rhea egg that is finished. one of them anyway. You can see the design here. This was how the egg began, and this is how it finished. Another design I did on the rear egg is this particular egg here, which is different as well. You can see how these eggs differ in the different designs. And one can be very creative with these eggs as you work on them. And finally, I have half a rear egg. Why do I have half? The egg broke, and so I continue to paint it and keep it there. It makes a nice talking point, conversation piece, and looks nice on the mantelpiece. So I did finish this egg. It was rather difficult to do, but the egg broke and I decided to finish it. So I have half a rear egg here, which I keep. And finally, we have the ostrich egg, which is a very big egg, as you can see. This is probably the largest that you can come up with today. The ostrich egg has a very glazed shell. And when you're doing the ostrich eggs, you have to dye them, leave them in the dye a long time, or try to remove this glaze beforehand. But even though you may remove the glaze, you'll find that there are speckles on the ostrich egg, which you can see, which sometimes come through in the dyes. So now I want to show you some of the ostrich eggs that I have finished. This is one, how it began, and this is the one that's finished with the minute detail on there that took months and hours of work to do. This is one of the ostrich eggs that I have in my cabinet. Another ostrich egg I have. I'm sorry I'm reaching over here because I have them at the side, is this one. Now this one was very difficult to do. The reason being, this egg is divided into three. 1, 2, 3, symbolizing the Trinity. And if you look, you can see it has all the meandering lines here that are symbols of eternity with no beginning and no end. On the top, you have the wheat, which is bread, the staff of life. And you can see the wheat here. And then, of course, you can see the dots, very just in the corners here. I'll try and bring it a little bit closer. And so you can see the dots there on this egg. But what was unusual about this egg, the 3 would symbolize the Trinity, would also be protection against fire, but the colors, this is an aquamarine and a scarlet red, and that's very difficult to produce. It takes hours of dyeing and hours of waiting and hours of patience. So this is one of my favorite ostrich eggs, which is divided into 3. And one more egg, which I want to share with you, is, I call this my masterpiece. This is divided into 4, symbolizing the 4 corners of the world, symbolizing the 4 evangelists. It has every symbol on here going with regard to the cross, the crucifixion, the tears, and of course the wheat and everything that pertains to life and life everlasting. On your screen, you can see now, I call this the wedding egg. It's called the wedding egg because, as you can see, there's a towel there. And if you look at the other photograph with this wedding egg, there are 2 towels there, one going one way and one going the other way. And that's for a wedding. If somebody asked me they'd like an egg for a wedding, this is what I would do. Why would I do the 2 towels? Because when a couple get married in our churches, it's the church that binds them together. It's the priest that ties their hands together with a towel that's normally embroidered by one of the members of the family or the bride. And this towel, the couple keep with them. So this is to remind them of the wedding that they have. And of course, you can see there in the wheat, just in the corners there, there you are, you see the wheat, and there you can see the two towels together. The wheat symbolizing that the young couple will always have bread on the table, bread being the staff of life. And of course, as you know, that in some of our traditions, the young couple are greeted with what's known as the bread called the korovai, which is a bread baked with all flowers, with all birds on, almost like a pysanka. It's all decorated like a pysanka to symbolize health, wealth, prosperity, and most of all, a good life. So this is the wedding egg, which I've produced for some couples. And here on this egg, you can see the top of the egg here that is sort of giving the different shapes of like a star, which is a reminder of the Star of Bethlehem and certainly the flowers. Now, the reindeer here is very prevalent in the ancient world. It's a symbol of strength and life. That's what the reindeer symbolizes, strength of life. And so even though it's a pagan symbol, we still produce it on today's Pysanky to remind us of creation, everything that we have and everything that is there. This is the trillium egg that I mentioned at the beginning with the serpent, and the color there, as I mentioned, brown for the earth, and certainly the meandering lines, and of course this subtle orange color symbolizing the warmth of the sun. But certainly brown colors were sort of symbolize the fall and the autumn, or mountains far away, and would symbolize the earth. One other thing which I haven't shown you yet, which I will now, is another type of egg that I do, which I have here. I do apologize for my disappearance. And these are those are my ancient eggs from the what we call the 70s. They're not from the 9th century, but the 70s. I managed to dig these. As you can see, some of them are broken, they're faded, but I've managed to treasure them, and I'm going to try and somehow fix them without changing anything, the original style as they were. So those are the original ones I did in the original box that I had. So the person gave them back to me and said, listen, I've had them, I've enjoyed them, I'd like you to have them now. And I'm very happy that it was a priest friend of mine that gave them back to me. Now, the other eggs that I do are these. As you can see, the little quail eggs and tiny finch eggs. As you can see here, I have one that I've started here, the quail egg. These are very difficult to do, especially the finch eggs, because they're very brittle and they break. So I'd like to show you now the smallest egg that I have here, which is, now the eggs you see on your screen now are flowers, and of course the sunflower, that's the symbol of rebirth, the spring, the coming of new life. Here I can show you and share with you now these tiny finch eggs, which I did. There are two in here. You can only see the one probably. And these took hours to do because the shells are very brittle. In fact, I think I broke 100 of those eggs before I managed to finish them. And finally, I have here some eggs which are finished. These are the quail eggs, as you can see. These are already finished. These are the white ones you saw, and this is now the finished product. I think you can just about see these. Oh, that's it. You can see them now. The finished products here. So this is another of my creation that I've done over the years. And then finally, I have here an egg which has been sort of divided into various parts of flowers and everything else. And this egg I keep for practical purposes, to copy the design, and to the people that are on it, to remind me of what I am doing. So now we come to the technique of how to decorate a pysanky. And now I just like to clear my little table here and show you now the technique of what we use. We use a stylus called a kistka. A kistka has a little funnel in at the end, with allowing beeswax to flow through it. And we use a candle with beeswax. We use beeswax because of its high melting power, and it's pure. It must be pure beeswax. Unfortunately, today, the beeswax is not as pure as it should be, unless you go to someone who has beehives. And of course, you have the flame here. You heat the kistka in the flame, like so, dip it in the beeswax or scoop it up, and then you begin to scribe a line on the egg. And of course, I have an egg here, which I'm going to scribe on, as you can see, the egg here. And we just dip it into the beeswax and continue to scribe a line on it. There we are. It's rather crooked because I'm holding the egg and I'm sort of looking at the time. You can just see the line there. Now, that's how we start the egg. I have still the original kistkas that my father made. My father's been dead over 30 years, God rest his soul. This is the original matchbox. It's an old pilot matchbox. And what he would do, he would turn old cans of soup, cut them up, and make a stylus like this. And we would put them in pieces of wood. And this is what I would use for doing Pysanky today. So when you have finished scribing on an egg, then the egg is ready to go into the white dye. And so we have here into the yellow dye. And so the egg is immersed into the yellow dye. And when you come out, the egg is this color. It becomes a yellow color. So what we do is then we add yellow to the parts that we want yellow. As you can see here, we have the yellow design and it's already been shaded in. The crosses here, the yellow. After doing the paint drawing of the yellow, bear in mind, Pysanky comes from the word pisati, which means it's the word to write. Once we have written on the egg, then it leaves an imprint, which you can't really remove. And all my students that I've taught them, even if they made a mistake, leave it. You can try and scratch it off, but beeswax leaves a mark, and then the mark that's left, it leaves it, and the Pysanky still comes out nice. Next, the color goes into red. You can see the finished product below, the different stages. And this is the red egg when it's being colored in red. The black that you see there is the black egg that is already being colored in. Finally, this goes into a dark color. The dark color then comes out like this, to have a dark color. And on the candle flame at the side, you just gently heat it to melt the wax off, not on top of the flame because of the carbon. And finally, you get the finished product, which is this itself, as you can see in the picture. That is the finished product today, which I finished the other week, the various stages in the Pysanky world. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the stages that I have completed with this egg. You can see initially the white star, you can see the yellow there, and the depiction there, the crosses in the yellow, finally going into the red, and the darkness there of the red, the dark color, which is sort of the background, which will give all the light of the colors, and finally the finished product at the end. And just for interest's sake, I can show you what I'm working on at the moment during this COVID period. That this is an egg I'm working on at the moment. This is a duck egg, believe it or not. And duck eggs are very difficult to work on because the shell is very greasy. And this one I finished this morning. I wanted to share that with you. I melted the wax off. It's one I finished this morning. And at the bottom of your screen, you can see a picture of my collection of the eggs I've done over the years. And you can see the blue one there, which is very popular. And on the blue one, you can see the pussy willow. Because in my tradition, on Palm Sunday, we don't bless palms, we bless pussy willow. When everything in the winter has died, the first tree to bloom in the spring is the pussy willow, a symbol of rebirth, a symbol of new life, a symbol of the resurrection, the Ligding. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for taking part. Thank you, Peter, and I'm very happy to take your questions. Here at the bottom, you can see now part of my display cabinet where I have all my eggs. And the photograph you see in the background with Pope Francis is a photo of the egg I gave to him. There's a blank spot there. I've left that blank spot purposely so that people can see the egg I gave Pope Francis is there in the background. And also one of the pictures on the initial cover of this talk, you'll see the two hands. That was the Pope's hand and my hand. And the Vatican photographer interpreted that from Michelangelo's creation in the Sistine Chapel, the two hands together, which I thought was a very, very beautiful concept. And certainly I was very moved by this whole meeting which I had, and explained to Pope Francis the whole significance and meaning of the Pysanky, as I have to you this afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you, Father Paul. I have a question.
Yes.
One of the viewers noticed that among the old eggs that you shared, the photo with the eggs in the carton, it appeared that one had a shamrock. Is there a Celtic theme?
There is. Well, I'll get the egg. Yes, it is. It's a form of a shamrock, but it symbolizes the Trinity. It's three of the leaves. It's symbol of the spring, the coming of spring. It can be interpreted as a shamrock. It's possible, but it can be, you know, some form of a clover, or some form of a plant. It could be anything, but it's a symbol of rebirth, a symbol of the Trinity, basically. But it may be interpreted as a shamrock.
And what duration of time does it take to decorate an egg completely?
It depends on the design. The simple designs we can do in 4 to 5 hours. These very intricate designs, as I showed you the one here, the ostrich egg. This one here. This took some months, because not only have you got to mark the egg out, it's the marking out the symmetry of the egg, which takes a lot of patience and endurance. And once you've done that, it's the position of the hand. You have to work on it in stages, walk away from it and come back to it. And that's what I've done here. This one took about 7 months. Some have taken almost a year, but you have to remember, you take a break in between sometimes, walking away from these eggs. And of course, the little chicken eggs, I can do those in a day, depending on the design. It also depends on the shell. Sometimes the eggshells are greasy and you have to leave them longer in the dye, maybe a couple of hours. You can't leave them too long because they can cake and the dye will come off. And of course, I didn't mention that the dyes we use are aniline dyes, which, you know, available. Those are non-edible. You can get edible dyes. And then I didn't mention there were 2 types of eggs, the Krashanka and the Pysanky. The Krashanka are boiled eggs, which are eaten, and the Pysanky are ornamental, which are kept.
You obviously plan your designs before you start each egg, Father. What do you use for inspiration?
I look around, you know, I look at things, you know, I go to galleries, art galleries, and I go to see different churches, see different museums, and there's always something that will catch my eye, and I think, yes, maybe I can do something like this or try something like that. You know, certainly the catacombs are an inspiration. It depends which part of the world I'm in. Or sometimes I dreamt about a design and woken up at 3 in the morning and started painting the egg. And sometimes I've been working on eggs till 3 in the morning and then get up at 6 to say the liturgy at 8 o'clock. That's during the snowstorms. It's much easier to work on eggs when there's a blizzard outside and it's snowing. You can't go anywhere. There's total concentration on the eggs.
Now, someone identifies as Gregory is wondering, what is your most beloved egg?
My most beloved egg would be the one I mentioned, this ostrich egg, 4 corners of the world. This is my beloved. This took almost a year to do. It was very difficult because the egg is divided into 4. Once you start going away from the traditional design of 2, dividing into 2 parts or just 4 parts without dividing it into the round parts, because bear in mind the 3 and the 4 are round, they're not square. That's very difficult. This is my favorite with the 40 days of Lent. Those are my favorite eggs. And of course, the one I gave the Holy Father was one of my favorites. That's why I gave it to him as well.
And Father, is there reading material? Are there books about this that people could learn more?
There are books available, but many of the books are showing of how to do them. You know, it's more of a technique and everything. I can share with you all this afternoon that I am working on a book. I have the photography and I've started to put things together, and I'm hoping to have my own book, which at some point hopefully will be published and available for everybody, from my own concept of how I've done the eggs over the years, and certainly what I've interpreted while doing them. But there is literature available. Yes, it's all out there. You can find it. But it's different. It depends on what you're interested in, and they're in different languages as well.
And several people have asked about whether the eggs contain the yolk or whether they're hollowed out before you begin.
Good question. I use both, and you can see the ones that were finished, they are blown out. You can buy now blown eggs. Certainly the ostrich eggs, the rear eggs, all these eggs that I showed you in the beginning, they're all blown because they're non-fertile. If they're fertile, you cannot get those eggs. If they're non-fertile, you can get ostrich eggs, because some people eat ostrich eggs. But if they're non-fertile, then you cannot get the eggs. But sometimes you can, and certainly if they're full, you can work on them, and it's easier to dye because when you immerse the egg in the dye, it goes right into the bottom. If they're blown, you have to hold the egg into the dye itself. It makes it a bit cumbersome, or try and hold it down with something and you can crush the shell. So you have to be very careful and experienced on how you do that. But there are blown eggs, and I've worked on blown eggs, and I worked on full eggs as well. The ones I showed you, 1 or 2 of them today. In actual fact, the one that I showed you earlier was a full egg, which is now blown. And if it's a full egg, the ones from my original 70s are not blown. They were all full. The danger is, if you put them in a display cabinet, they can explode after a while. But one of the aspects today is to drill a hole in, allowing the air to come out, and they dry up inside, and they can be kept forever. And you have to keep these Pysanky out of direct sunlight so the sun doesn't fade the designs, as in all artwork, to keep all artwork out of sunlight.
Father Paul, a viewer noted the icon on the egg that is displayed here in your cabinet and wondered about the length of time it required for that to be created.
That icon in the display cabinet was given to me by someone in Ukraine. I always keep that at the forefront. I've done one similar to that, but I haven't finished it. I've done a similar icon. That's the one that was given to me by someone as a gift that did that so many years ago. Because I have 1 or 2 eggs not in the cabinet now, apart from that one. They're given to my various artists all over the world that I've known, and we've exchanged eggs in between. And I exchanged one of my eggs, and this lady gave me one of her eggs of this icon of Christ there.
Father, you mentioned that occasionally you experience breakage, and what do you do when that happens?
Well, I still eat scrambled eggs and, you know, easy eggs over and whatever. If it breaks, it breaks, and there's nothing you can do. But I've also learned now over the years that I can repair eggs if they break now. For example, I had a lecture in Philadelphia. I had some students there, and the people working very well. And also I had it up in Rhode Island, the college there, and the university there, and 1 or 2 of the students broke the eggs in Philadelphia, and they were heartbroken. So I took the eggs home and I worked on them. Eggs were finished, but they dropped them and broke them, and I repaired them. So now I've learned how to repair eggs that are broken. And you can put them back together. It's painstaking, but it can be done. You have to empty out the yolk and dry everything, and then somehow stick it together with the varnish. It takes a bit of time, but it can be done.
And of course, you mentioned that you learned this tradition from your parents.
Yes, I used to watch my mother as a child. I used to watch her. It was a very simple designs, like almost like a drop technique, just a few to color eggs. And so I used to play with it and color my eggs. And as the Lenten spring came, I would sort of, you know, start doing the eggs and everything else. And as the years went on, I would simply do them during Lent, but then I was asked to give talks and different television appearances. And then I started to do them all the year round, which I do now. In the summer, it's a bit more difficult because it's very warm. You know, when you're handling wax, it can become kind of tacky and everything. But to try and do them all the year round so that, you know, develop the technique. And from those early years to the present day, I have developed my own technique of mixing colors and getting the different vibrant colors that we have today, some pastel colors sometimes, the different things that we have today.
Do you have a particular egg that you prefer to work on from a particular bird?
The probably the goose egg. The goose egg is probably the favorite one. Most people like the goose egg, but all of them really. The rear eggs and ostrich eggs, they're sort of specialized. I don't do any of the little eggs when I'm working on those. I strictly stick to this one design of the ostrich egg, so I don't lose the focus of what I'm doing. But certainly the goose egg is probably my favorite one to work on.
And how does prayer enter into your making the Pysanky? Do you pray before? Do you pray during?
The tradition is to pray before. The idea is that you say, Bože, blahoslovi I pomože, God bless and help me to continue this work. In actual fact, in my little studio upstairs, I have a little icon there of the Blessed Virgin from Počajiv, which is always next to me there. And I just work up there, and I've done that for years and work on the cross of St. Francis of Assisi. He's up there as well. I have the cross up there. And I have those all the time with me, that a reminder of what I'm doing.
Let's see. I think we're getting close to the bottom here.
This is my
do you draw the design freehand, or do you use a lathe or some other device?
Everything is freehand with the eye, as best as I can. I've done them. They have all these. The thing is that they have all these lathes, and even I've heard different gadgets that they have. But that's not the way. The whole idea is freehand to do everything. That's difficult. You know, so I normally stick to doing everything as freehand as best as I can. But even though you may use lathes and everything else, it's the texture of the stylus. Because if you notice, my lines are very thin. I've always tried to maintain the aspect of thin lines, not sometimes I do the thicker lines, but I always do the aspect of thinner lines. It gives it this finesse and this finish as well, which is important.
Now, do you sketch your designs on paper before you actually get to writing them on the egg and using the beeswax?
Sometimes I sketch them on paper. Sometimes, otherwise, I just start with regular division into half, quarters, and then different divisions that we have. And of course, there are different divisions. I think I can show you one here, which I didn't. There's the egg here. This is a different division. You see, it's on a slope, this one. There are many different divisions that we have, and these are very difficult to do. You really can't do that on a lathe or anything. This has to be done by freehand. Then, of course, there's the different ones that we have, the divisions that we saw the swan egg. This is an egg of the different division. It's divided into 4. the different way it's divided. And then the egg with the wheat, I call it the saddleback design. These you can't do on a lathe. This has to be done by freehand.
And I have one last question for you, Father. A viewer indicates that he or she had a wooden egg with Pysanky art on it from Poland. Is that something that, do you know about wooden eggs, and are they?
Yeah. There are wooden eggs today. There are ceramic eggs. There's all sorts of eggs today. You can get them, yes. But then they're really representing the Pysanky, but they're not a Pysanky because it's not a real egg. They're just representations of the Pysanky. But that's what it is. And then I wanted to, when I mentioned the saddleback, this is the one that's divided differently as well. This is very difficult to do, the division here on this egg. You really can't do this on a lathe. This is all freehand, and it's sort of hit and miss. Sometimes you can make a mistake. Once you've made the mistake, that's it. But the eggs still come out, and no two eggs are alike, because when a chicken lays an egg, no two eggs are the same.
Well, Father, I'm delighted. Thank you so much for your presentation this afternoon.
Thank you.
Your knowledge and expertise of Pysanky is extreme, and we're all very we're grateful and have benefited a lot from your sharing it. I'm sure there'll be further questions, and if there are, I would invite people to email museum@kofc.org. And I'll do my best to share them with Father Paul and answer those questions. To reiterate, this video is being recorded, and the session will be available on the Knights of Columbus YouTube and Facebook accounts. Please expect a follow-up email message tomorrow with a link. And until next week's presentation, I thank you again for your participation. I wish you good health, and God bless.
Thank you.